Okay, we're live streaming now.
Are you ready for us to actually start the meeting?
Yes, we can begin now.
Okay, we'll give everybody 30 seconds to get their act in order and I'll start it. Good afternoon, everyone. I hereby call this remote meeting of the WMSC, the Washington Metrorail Safety Commission, to order. My apologies for technical difficulties that have caused us to start a few minutes late. This meeting is being recorded as well as streamed live for the public. Mr. Smith, do we have a quorum today?
Yes, Chair Hart, we have a quorum. You're here, Vice Chair Hall is here, Secretary Treasurer for our Dyke is, Commissioner Rush, Commissioner Al-Khatib, and alternate Commissioner Lobby are present.
Okay, thank you, Mr. Smith. We will start today with our safety message from WMSC's Emergency Management Specialist, Richard David. Mr. David.
Thank you, Chair Hart. September is Emergency Preparedness Month. Don't forget the 3 Ps: plan, prepare, and practice. Plan for emergencies, such as storms that sometimes happens in our area. Prepare for the emergencies by having an emergency at home, by having an emergency kit at home with such items as a flashlight, additional batteries, shelf-stable food, water, a first aid kit, and a battery-powered radio. And make sure you practice. Talk with the people you live and work with about what to do, and even hold household and workplace evacuation drills. This can especially help children or anyone new to a home or office be prepared, and this can help reduce panic in a real emergency. Be consistent in planning, preparation, and practice can help lead to a safer outcome. Stay informed, stay healthy, and stay safe. Excuse me. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. David. We will now move on to the minutes from our last meeting. Secretary Treasurer Farrar Dyke, the floor is yours.
Good afternoon. The minutes of the August 9th, 2022 meeting were posted for your review. Are there any additional corrections or additions to the minutes? If not, I move approval of the August 9th minutes as circulated. Is there a second?
Second.
Commissioner Ho has seconded the motion. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say yay.
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 Any opposed?
Commissioner for our Dyke, the vote is 5-0 and the motion carries.
Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. Next item on the agenda is public comments. We provide an opportunity for public comments at each of our meetings, and we will now ask if any members of the public who have joined our Zoom webinar would like to speak. If you would like to speak, please use the raise hand feature in Zoom, and our staff will unmute one person at a time. Each person will have a maximum of 2 minutes. I will pause now to see if we have any public comments. While I'm pausing, I would also remind everyone, including those of you watching on YouTube, that you can always report any concerns through our website, wmsc.gov, through our social media channels like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or by email. And I would also like to thank those employees and members of the public who submitted information to us, because it was very helpful, the information including pictures, because it was very helpful and it enabled us to pursue safety issues. Ms. Miner, do we have anyone who has indicated they would like to speak?
I see no hands.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Miner. We will now continue with the next agenda item, which is my remarks. Our meeting today includes updates on the WMSC's ongoing safety oversight activities, including the status of Metrorail's response to our order related to the 7000 series rail cars, our oversight of Metrorail safety certification process for Silver Line Phase 2, and other actions that we are taking to ensure that Metrorail continuously improves the safety of its system. We are also considering updates to our DBE plan, which is important to our commitment to diversity and inclusion. That's the DBE plan. We will look at that later this meeting. WMSC staff will provide further updates as part of this meeting. Next on the agenda is the CEO's remarks. Dr. Meyer, do you have any opening remarks?
Yes, sir, I do. Good afternoon. On the afternoon of September 2nd, Metrorail provided a revised 7000 series railcar return to service plan, and we were able to communicate that same afternoon that we had no technical objections to this revised plan. Ms. Samara Singha will provide an overview of Metrorail's plan later in the meeting, including the role that Metrorail's new vehicle and track working group can play in Metrorail developing and implementing effective mitigations and solutions. The mitigations in the revised plan reflect currently known data, including wheel migration has been identified on more than 50 7000 series axles since 2017, including measurements confirmed using the current inspection procedure. Trains in passenger service, primarily on the yellow and green lines beginning in June, had no identified wheel migration in Metrorail inspections. Those trains in passenger use under Metrorail's May 19th return to service plan were selected from a specific group of 7000 series cars. Available information continues to suggest that there are multiple contributing factors to this wheel migration on 7000 series cars, including factors that could differ across similar elements of the Metrorail system. And the wheel migration issue remains under investigation. In addition, Metrorail knew in 2014 or 2015 of a series of instances of wheel migration on its legacy rail cars, that is, the fleets prior to the 7000 series. Metrorail's engineering report, completed by an engineering consulting firm in 2015, identified safety issues related to both wheel axle assembly specifications and implementation, and to the force placed on the wheel by flanges in Metrorail's tracks. This report was prepared prior to the existence of the WMSC, and we learned of it through the investigation. Metrorail track and engineering leadership also learned of the report at this time. Following the report, Metrorail adjusted or created specifications regarding interference fit and press tonnage for railcar axles. For the 7000 series cars, Metrorail made these specifications applicable only to cars and axles produced after Metrorail communicated this change to its contractor, Kawasaki. This means that the new specifications applied to approximately the final 1/3 of the 7000 series cars Metrorail accepted, and not the first 2/3 of the 748 cars. Metrorail did not address the other identified item in its wheel migration report, a concern with flangeway width on restraining rails throughout the system. The report identified that only a small fraction of the press tonnage force applied to the flange of a wheel by improperly placed restraining rail can cause wheel migration on an axle. Setting the proper flangeway width is critical to ensuring that no unnecessary force is placed in the wheel flange by the restraining rail. The report identified that repeated application of forces from these improperly placed restraining rails can lead to wheel migration. The 2015 Metrorail engineering report also called for adjustments to the restraining rail flangeway widths. However, Metrorail did not make these changes. In fact, an internal review published in June of 2022 of work Quico did in 2020 and 2021 questions Metrorail's standards for restraining rail and calls for, among other things, an engineering study and updated design criteria based on the results of that study. A recent and positive development is that Metrorail has chartered an internal multidisciplinary vehicle and track working group. This group has a formal charter and has begun meeting. Metrorail, and in particular this working group, should fully consider and address these prior engineering conclusions and recommendations, as well as additional information developed during the ongoing derailment investigation. This multidisciplinary group is well positioned to do this, and we look forward to learning about its activities very soon. As we approach the anniversary of the derailment, the WMSC has done a significant amount of work to oversee Metrorail's activities related to 7000 series rail cars, and we continue to participate in all possible aspects of the investigation and to provide an appropriately cautious path to restoring 7000 series service in light of evidence and engineering. We have, of course, also continued our detailed safety oversight work in many other areas. Recently, that work includes the continued focus on our oversight of Metrorail safety certification process for Silver Line Phase 2. Our team and I regularly meet with Metrorail, review documents and data, and observe activities such as training, exercises, and the other final preparations to open the line. Metrorail has told us that they expect to conclude their safety certification work in the next month or so, and we have been conducting our oversight on an ongoing basis since 2019. Because we clearly and quickly communicate any issues that we find, and because of the extensive work done up to this point, we expect that Metrorail and the Airports Authority will be able to address any issues in a timely fashion. We will review the additional work that Metrorail or MWA must complete in the coming weeks in a similar fashion once it's completed. Metrorail determines when to open the line, but they may only do that after they complete their safety certification process, and we concur that they properly completed that process, including any safety mitigations, testing, staffing, and training. We are prepared to provide our concurrence once Metrorail and the Airports Authority demonstrate that they have completed all safety requirements specified in their processes and procedures. We'll continue to review their work on an ongoing basis. Moving on to ongoing investigations, we continue to examine the Red Line smoke event that began on the evening of July 30th. Metrorail plans to hold its after-action review for this event this week with first responders. Data review and analysis are ongoing. The smoke in this event was due to electrical arcing from cables on the tunnel wall, and it was identified by a smoke alarm between DuPont Circle and Woodley Park stations. Smoke was later also identified by Metrorail personnel in DuPont Circle Station and by a train operator who had departed Woodley Park Station after a rail traffic controller had attempted to contact the train operator to hold the train at that station. We continue to work on this investigation in conjunction with Metrorail to ensure that Metrorail takes corrective actions to reduce the risk of recurrence. As always, when the investigation is completed, the final report will be presented to you at a future public meeting for adoption. All adopted reports are available on our website. Regarding some of our other recent activities, as part of our continuing oversight of Metrorail personnel certification, Metrorail has confirmed that all active personnel requiring train operator certification will be up to date and currently certified as of the end of this month. We have observed some of the training. In addition, we reviewed documentation last week that showed that more than 90% of active personnel requiring train operator certification are up to date. Terminal supervisors were the group that had the highest percentage outstanding among individuals who require certification under Metrorail safety rules and procedures. Metrorail stated that they will be up to date by the end of the month as committed to in Metrorail's corrective action plan. We will be verifying Metrorail's action through document and data reviews as part of our CAP oversight process, as these steps are being conducted in response to our findings that brought this safety issue to Metrorail's management's attention. We continue our oversight of corrective action plan implementation and development, including the CAP related to automatic train control rooms that we issued last month. Ms. Rhodes will provide a CAP oversight update later in this meeting. Looking ahead to next month's public meeting, we expect that Metrorail will be submitting its Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, or PTAS, and we'll be reviewing it then. Staff reviewed Metrorail's draft for compliance with our program standard, federal regulation, and in accordance with our program standard, I transmitted conditional approval earlier this month. The proposed revision is currently with the Metro Board for its consideration. And a final item that I would mention is, as you said, Chair Hart, later in the meeting, we will be asking the commissioners to adopt our updated DBE plan and a DBE program and a DBE goal, that's disadvantaged business enterprise goal. This is an important aspect, as you said, of our activities. And when Secretary Farrar Dyke introduces that item, our CFO, Kyle Angie, will be responding to questions and presenting the item, which reflects his evolving oversight of that aspect of our program. Thank you. That concludes my remarks.
Thank you, Dr. Meyer. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Dr. Meyer?
I have a question for Dr. Meyer, Chair.
Yes, please, Commissioner Lobby.
Very interesting report, Dr. Meyer. I was interested in the number of 7,000 cars that are out of service and the oncoming Silver Line 2 opening. have we considered, or do we know the number of cars, number of trains that Washington Metro will need to support that service when it does open? It would seem to be putting an extra strain on the number of train sets in the fleet to open this new line. Has that been a consideration?
I know it's a very active consideration for Metrorail's own service planning, but I really think it is for Metrorail to answer a question like that. Our consideration really revolves around safety of the cars and whether or not it's appropriate to run cars at all or run additional service. And then the capacity that's necessary to run any given level of service, of course, is for Metrorail to communicate on.
So they will continue to operate within the fleet limits that they have now. There's no additional cars that will be released as part of the Silver Line opening.
They're currently operating on the return to service plan that we approved on September 2nd. They have not announced a date for opening of the Silver Line. There is certainly every opportunity for them to propose updates to their current return to service plan that might change the availability of cars in service. But as of today's date, the approved plan is the one that I talked about on September 2nd.
Okay, so this would be a future discussion on additional train sets.
Correct. And I'm sure that discussion will be coming.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lobby. Any other questions from any of the other commissioners for Dr. Meyer? Okay, seeing none, we will move on to a status update. Speaking of the 7000 series cars, a status update on the orders related to those 7000 series rail cars. Ms. Samar Singham.
Thank you, Chair Hart. We continue to oversee Metrorail's implementation of its return to service plan. Metrorail is approximately 2 weeks into implementation of the revisions to its plan as submitted to us the afternoon of September 2nd. Due to our open communication, we were able to notify Metrorail that same afternoon that we had no technical objections to their revised plan. These Metrorail plans and the submissions of any revisions are required in accordance with the Wmsc's December 29th order. As Dr. Meyer mentioned, the mitigations in the revised plan reflect currently known data, including that wheels have migrated on dozens of 7000 series axles since 2017. This includes measurements on more than 30 cars that were reconfirmed using the current inspection procedure. Other known data includes that the trains in use in June, July, and August were selected from a specific pool of cars and operated primarily on the yellow and green lines. Metrorail did not detect wheel migration failures on those cars. The WMSC will continue to incorporate into these discussions any information gleaned from our ongoing work related to the NTSB investigation into the October 12th derailment. We continue to get new information, data, and analysis on an ongoing basis. The NTSB investigation has progressed and gathered additional information. Recent investigative activities have included reviews of reports, data analysis, and meetings with parties to the investigation. Available information continues to suggest there are multiple contributing factors to this wheel migration on the 7000 series rail cars, including factors that could differ across similar elements of the Metrorail system. Safety requirements of Metrorail's current return to service plan include inspections of back-to-back and journal-bearing gaps after 4 consecutive days in service, up from the previous single service day, a maximum of 20 passenger trains in service per day. Metrorail is metering this increase as part of an effort to ensure it can handle the inspections process. Use of the trains in passenger service only on the red, yellow, and green lines are also one of the safety requirements of this current return to service plan. Along with that, a metered increase in the number of trains in service and a pause in any increases if there are process failures. Continued use of a specific pool of cars is also a safety requirement that is in place. As a note, the WMSC provided no technical objection to adjustments to this group to include additional cars requested by Metrorail. Data and analysis for 30 days of passenger service is also a requirement in the new plan. Continuing other requirements, such as the requirement that all personnel involved be trained on their roles and responsibilities as it pertains to this plan. And then finally, a chartered multidisciplinary vehicle and track group and a specific vehicle control and compliance procedures. These are all the requirements that are in place to ensure the highest levels of practicable safety as it pertains to the current return to service plan that received a no technical objection on September 2nd. Metrorail's revised plan does not include the use of automated wayside inspection systems, or AWIS or AWIS. To mention again, the Vehicle and Track Working Group, Metrorail has established this group with a long-term charter that brings together individuals from a variety of departments, and they have begun meetings. The WMSC has highlighted to WMATA the need for Metrorail to fully, seriously, and with exigency consider and address engineering recommendations and suggestions previously identified by Metrorail, additional information obtained through the ongoing NTSB derailment investigation, and other Metrorail data, including known wheel migration. We will continue our own oversight and data analysis, but we are hopeful that Metrorail will utilize this group and all other available information and expertise to develop and implement effective and lasting mitigations. We also continue our oversight of Metrorail's implementation of its plan and communicate any issues in Metrorail's implementation as they are identified. For example, on September 7th, Metrorail placed a 7000 series train into passenger service on the Blue Line for more than an hour, contrary to its return to service plan. Line limitations are important to ensure that too many variables are not changed at the same time, so that data collected on wheel migration or lack thereof can be properly evaluated. That concludes my presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Ms. Samarasinha. What you just said answered one of my questions, which is why are these trains not being reinstated on the Blue Line? But another question I had is you mentioned that there was a look at a specific pool of cars that have been operating on the Green and Yellow Line. Could you explain the point of that?
Sure. At the time that we said no technical objections to the first phase of this plan, which went into effect on May 19th, Metro had selected a pool of cars that includes cars 7500 to 7747. And Metrorail's selection of these cars were based on the revised press specifications for these cars. So that was the reason for the selection of these cars.
Okay, thank you. Do any of the other commissioners have any questions for Ms. Samarasinha?
I have a question, Chair Hart.
Yes, please, Commissioner Hall.
Thank you. Since the return to service plans have gone into effect, since May 19th, have we been aware of any of the 7000 series cars being found to be out of compliance?
As far as in service,
You mean out of compliance with regard to their back-to-back measurements?
Yes.
Go ahead, Ms. Samarasinha. I just want to make sure that was clear.
Commissioner Hall, as far as in service out of compliance, there have been none. However, the pool of data is not yet complete, and therefore we are always awaiting additional data to understand the landscape as it pertains to back-to-back inspections and wheel migration issues.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Hall. Any further questions from any of the other commissioners for Ms. Samarasinha? Okay, seeing none, we will now move on to our next item, which is audits with an update from Program Coordination Specialist, Ms. Ashley Rhodes. Ms. Rhodes?
Thank you, Chair Hart. The final audit of this 3-year cycle relates to Metrorail's communication systems, programs related to voice or data transmission systems, and related equipment such as radio and public address systems. We transmitted the draft report to Metrorail last month for technical review. We are now considering Metrorail's comments in response to that draft report and expect to issue the final report soon. As with each of our audits, the work on this audit included extensive reviews of Metrorail documents, on-site work such as interviews with numerous people, and site visits to various parts of the Metrorail system. Our audits assess Metrorail against the relevant criteria, such as the requirements of Metrorail's Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan, requirements specified in other Metrorail documents, such as SOPs and orders, and regulatory requirements. These audits cover all aspects of Metrorail's Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan over a 3-year period and are designed to proactively identify safety issues. We are now preparing to submit the draft track audit report to Metrorail in coming weeks. This is the first audit of our next triennial cycle. As such, it includes an assessment of corrective action plans Metro implemented as a result of the WMSC's previous track audit issued in 2020. Another audit team is finalizing the draft report of our audit of Metrorail's internal safety reviews and associated corrective actions. Metrorail's internal safety reviews are required by the WMSC program standard and by federal regulation. They are designed to proactively identify safety deficiencies and to lead to corrective actions to address each deficiency. These reviews complement the WMSC's audits as they are generally conducted in between the WMSC's audits. Our audit of the internal safety review program identified a number of positive practices. We held an exit conference with Metrorail last week. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Rhodes. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Rhodes? Okay, seeing none, we will now take up the next agenda item, which is corrective action plans. Mrs. Rhodes, you're up. Ms. Rhodes, you're up again.
Thank you, Chair Hart. When Metrorail develops corrective action plans to address the safety deficiencies identified by WMSC findings and recommendations or other issues specified by the WMSC program standard, Metrorail submits these plans to the WMSC for review and approval. Each CAP is a specific plan to address a safety deficiency, so the proactive identification of these deficiencies by the WMSC and later, the resolution of these deficiencies by Metrorail is part of the continuous safety improvement process. After Metrorail submits acceptable CAP proposals that will address the safety deficiency, Metrorail is responsible for implementing its corrective action plans on the schedule documented in the CAP. We conduct our audits and oversight activities on an ongoing basis. This has led to audits, which to this point have each included findings, being issued every few months. Corrective actions to address each finding typically take months or years to implement, as the CAPs are designed to systemically address issues identified by the finding. CAPs typically also include documentation of implementation prior to closure by the WMSC. The systemic nature of required fixes and the WMSC's detailed ongoing work means that the raw number of open CAPs may increase over time. The existence of CAPs demonstrates the ongoing work towards continuous improvement. Regarding current CAP proposal statuses, of the 18 CAPs to address findings and recommendations from the rail operations audit, we have approved all 18 of Metrorail's proposals. 11 of Metrorail's 13 proposed station, elevator, and escalator audit CAPs have been approved. In addition, the WMSC has approved Metrorail's revised CAP proposal to address the requirements of our order on Metrorail's improper power restoration that we issued in May. Regarding the order we issued August 4th on automatic train control room inspection, maintenance and cleaning, Metrorail requested and the WMSC granted a 2-week extension to submit the required corrective action plan proposal. Metrorail assigned a vice president on August 25th to lead development of this CAP proposal. Metrorail stated that it would take additional time to develop a full plan to address the finding. This corrective action plan proposal was received last Friday and is currently under WMSC review. In accordance with our program standard, our team will carefully review this proposal to determine whether it is acceptable or whether revisions are required. The complexity and detail of the initial proposals shape the duration of this review process, including any necessary revisions from Metrorail. As specified in the program standard, we will provide a response to Metrorail on this specific CAP proposal within 14 days. Overall, Metrorail currently has 133 open WMSC CAPs. The total number of CAPs reflects the areas where the WMSC has identified safety deficiencies as specified in the program standard. This includes Metrorail not complying with its own requirements, personnel or assets exhibiting an unsafe condition, Metrorail lacking a rule or procedure, or Metrorail having an insufficient procedure. This also includes areas where the WMSC has made safety recommendations that Metrorail is implementing corrective action plans to address. These actions each make Metrorail safer. Metrorail's PTASP then specifies that the effectiveness of these mitigations are assessed and improved on through Metrorail's SMS processes. Even after a CAP is closed, the WMSC also monitors Metrorail's actions on an ongoing basis through our audit, inspection, and other oversight activities. Since the last public meeting, the WMSC has closed 9 CAPs. 7 of these CAP closures are due to Metrorail completing the actions specified in its corrective action plans. CAPs closed based on Metrorail completing the associated actions include C0066 that created a standardized certification process for rail traffic controllers in the ROCC. Related to our elevated structures audit, Metrorail has completed the requirements for CAP C0076 to provide dye penetrant kits and D-meters necessary to complete inspections of certain elevated structures and updated associated training. Metrorail has also implemented technology integration, file naming conventions, and centralized structural inspection reports as specified in CAP C0080, and has implemented new oversight of the qualifications of elevated structure inspection contractors as specified in C0081. Related to our roadway maintenance machine audit as part of CAP C0087, Metrorail has added a position and created an SOP to begin collecting and utilizing reliability data for RMMs, and is reviewing this data monthly to assess trends. Metrorail has also completed updates for yard vehicle movement training for mechanics and updated training calendars as specified in CAP C0095. FTA 17-1-10 relates to a series of FTA findings related to Metrorail's traction power system cables, including return cables. Since the FTA's findings in 2016, Metrorail has elevated cables from tunnel floors, created cable replacement plans and installation procedures, updated design drawings, and has implemented other safety improvements. The 8th closed CAP, CAP C0037, was closed because it has been superseded by a new corrective action plan based on how Metrorail proposed its CAP required to address the issues identified in our May 17th order regarding Metrorail's improper restoration of power. Metrorail is now implementing that new CAP. The 9th and final closed CAP, FTA TSR 18-003, relates to Metrorail's hazard management procedure. This is being addressed through Metrorail's ongoing implementation of its safety management system as specified in Metrorail's PTASP. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Rhodes, for a very comprehensive presentation. One of the aspects you mentioned was about making sure that is evaluating caps to make sure that after they've been closed, they're still being followed. So are you aware of any instances, or anybody else on the staff aware of any instances where we went back and looked at a cap that had been closed and approved and then wasn't being followed? Are you aware of any situations like that?
Thank you, Chair Hart. Given my relative newness to the organization, I'd like to see if Dr. Meyer or Ms. Samara Singh have any thoughts on that
Sure.
historically.
Even though, and I'll use this example because that's the most recent example I can provide. And this pertains to C0037 that Ms. Rhodes just referenced as she was presenting the caps that have been closed. So C0037 emerged out of a finding that we issued in May of 2020 on premature power restoration and the hazards associated with it. As that cap was being brought to a close, as we watched it progress from May 2020 until May 2022 of this year, what we noticed was, as it was getting ready to be submitted for closure, we noticed that there weren't the required controls in place, nor was Metro following the required administrative controls through SOPs and such that were in place as we were tracking the progress of that cap. And that led to us issuing the order, the improper power restoration order of May 17th, which led to Metro proposing a new set of corrective actions, which we have reviewed and now approved as a new cap, C0212. And so that would be a near-term example or a very recent example of us tracking the completion of various actions associated with caps, evaluating those caps at the conclusion before we formally close them, and then staying abreast of the associated corrections on the other side of those caps being completed so that the corrections are sustained. So I hope that gives you a good example.
Yes, thank you, Ms. Samar Singh. That's very helpful. And I assume that this is a good example, that my assumption was correct, that there is follow-up, and that once a cap is finished, we don't just say, okay, that's it. We're not going to pay attention to that anymore. So thank you. Thank you for that. Are there any questions from any of the other commissioners for Ms. Rhodes?
Yes, Chair Hart, I have a question.
Yes, Commissioner Hall, please.
Also, perhaps going back to the historical perspective, since the Wmsc assumed safety oversight of Metrorail operations, and I know that when that point of transfer took place, there were a large number of corrective action plans that were outstanding at that time. Since that time frame, and looking forward to current days, our current time frame, have we seen progress being made in terms of closure of caps?
Commissioner Hall, when you say closure of caps, can you be a little more specific?
Where Metro has been able to close out corrective action plans to our satisfaction?
The answer is yes. On an ongoing basis, there are requirements set in place as far as the corrections, as well as timeframes that Metro needs to adhere to in completing those corrections. And when those are sufficiently completed within the timeframes that are prescribed, those actions are presented to us in documentation to say, WMSC, can you consider closing this cap? Because we have met the requirements and we've met the timeframes that are prescribed. And so at that point, we evaluate them and close them. And so there is an ongoing slate of caps that come to us for closure, which we evaluate. We conduct field verifications in some instances prior to closing them, and then we do close them. So there is an ongoing cadence of caps that are closed once the requirements are met by Metrorail. I hope that answers your question.
Well, it does. And I guess essentially what I'm asking is, are we seeing positive progress being made in terms of activity on the caps?
I think the simple answer to that is yes. I mean, Metro takes its commitments to caps very seriously, and both teams, the Metro teams and the WMSC team, take not just the action steps that are necessary to close caps very seriously, but also the setting of deadlines to try to make them realistic and achievable. So I'm not sure if this is exactly what you're asking, Commissioner Hull, but you know, on a daily basis, I see communication going back and forth between WMSC and Metrorail pertaining to progress on individual action items, on caps, on reevaluating whether or not the action plan that may have been approved a year ago is still the best plan, or whether the deadlines are still achievable. So there is an enormous amount of communication that goes on, and in that I see an enormous amount of taking seriously the caps on the part of Metro and progress and work in the right direction. I don't know if that really gets at what you're asking, but maybe it's a way to try to address it.
It does, and I see that as positive, and I appreciate the responses that both you and Ms. Samar Singh provided. Thank you.
Well, thank you for the question, Commissioner Hall. I interpreted your question as to what extent are the legacy caps that we inherited that were put in place before we came into position, to what extent are those legacy caps, have they been taken care of?
To respond to your question, Chair Hart, I believe with the closure of the 2 FTA caps that I mentioned in this presentation, we just have one legacy cap left, which is an NTSB cap. I can go back and double check our records, but that's my recollection. So in short, a lot of progress on closing those legacy caps that were inherited from FTA or NTSB.
Okay, thank you, Ms. Rhodes. Any questions from any of the other commissioners for Ms. Rhodes?
I have a question, Chair Hart.
Yes, please, Commissioner Lobby.
I note that you indicated that there's 133 current open caps. Can you tell me, is that number growing or shrinking as we move as we make progress on these caps?
Thank you, Commissioner Lobby. As stated in the presentation, it's not exactly a linear measurement of progress. I am interested in looking up the number that we provided in the last meeting to see whether that number is greater or less. So if you give me a few moments, I can try to dig up our script from last meeting and give you a solid answer on whether that number is more or less than last time.
Actually, Ms. Rhodes, rather than doing that in real time, we can certainly answer the question at a subsequent public meeting. However, I would like to explain the approach in terms of caps and the number of caps to the commissioners, which is on a regular basis based on the progress being made on caps and the completion of the work associated with each individual cap, and therefore Metrorail coming to us for closures. That reduces the number. However, through our audits program and standalone work that produces various findings, those things as findings result in corrective action plans that are sufficiently detailed and sufficiently urgent, and we've approved those add to the total number of caps that are being worked on. So as Ms. Rhodes explained, it's a sliding scale of numbers. Currently, yes, the number does track upwards because caps do require time to complete. And I think at this moment in time, we do add more caps into the slate than the caps that are getting closed. However, that is not a linear progression.
That's understandable. I'm more interested in what the long-term trend looks like. You know, we report a number at these meetings, but certainly I think the trend would help us understand what direction we're going in, whether we're finding more and more things that we have to address with Washington Metro, or whether they're making gains in the safety field and getting some of these things under control. I think that would be a very interesting statistic, and I'd almost like to see a graph every month to show where we are and what direction we're going on these, because I think that's a very useful metric for our discussions.
We can definitely work to provide that, and we can put our heads together on other metrics that may be appropriate. I do want to make sure that we clearly make the point that we don't believe that the current number of open caps, much as it's a workload measure and it's an important number, but it's not a surrogate for asking a question like, is the system getting safer or not, or something like that, because each individual cap is not necessarily equivalent to every other cap. In other words, one cap may have a dozen action steps that are very complicated or need funding in order to be achieved, whereas another cap may have a shorter number of action steps that don't really have a direct cost, and so maybe that can get implemented faster. It's just, there's a lot of complexity under the hood, and definitely want to make sure we keep that in mind.
Yeah, certainly we should keep that in mind, but it is a stake in the ground. I know from my past career at Federal Railroad Administration, we used to keep track of open recommendations from NTSB, and that was an important parameter for us to measure how responsive we were and how we were progressing against NTSB recommendations in that case. This is similar case, and I think you have to take it with a grain of salt, but it's a bit of information I think that would be useful in looking at the overall context of both WMSC's actions on Washington Metro and their response to the things that we're telling them. So I think it's an important stake in the ground.
Thank you, Commissioner Lobby. And I would add to what Dr. Meyer said, that it's important to keep in mind, we're relatively early in the process. We've just completed our first 3-year cycle of audits, and I would expect that with every audit, there are going to be more caps. So does more caps mean things are getting worse, or does more caps mean our oversight is digging into areas that we hadn't before as per our audit schedule? So that it's an important stake in the ground, but we have to qualify it appropriately. So thank you for the question.
And I do think it's important to bear in mind that, part of the evidence of our active oversight is the existence of caps. So you probably will not see a time when there are no caps. However, there may be other ways to get at the data. And one of the reasons for bringing and creating Ms. Rhodes' position and bringing her aboard is to begin to look at ways that we may be able to get at the dynamics that are inside this data. For instance, looking at the completion of action steps and whether or not that was timely as along the journey toward the closure of caps might actually get us at more interesting metrics that might be useful to the commissioners to judge the performance. One of the things that Ms. Rhodes has been working on since her arrival, along with Mr. Raddick, is working on a database transition project to migrate our overall tracking of caps, maintenance of caps, and accessibility of that data into a new system, and be able to confidently and competently say at each meeting just how many caps they're open, and be able to manage the data. And that project is really nearing its completion internally. And I think it's a perfect time to begin to think about what comes next and being able to manage and report out on this data.
So thank you for the questions from the commissioners. Are there any questions from any of the other commissioners for Ms. Rhodes on this report? Okay, hearing none, we will now move to our next agenda item, which is our regular status report on our oversight of the Silver Line Phase 2 safety certification process. Mr. Sahu, the floor is yours.
Yeah, thank you, Chair Hart. Our team continues to observe Metrorail and MWA's Silver Line Phase 2 activities. Since your last meeting, for example, we have observed full-scale exercises, Metrorail training activities, and other work along the new stations, mainline tracks, and rail yard. I and the team also have regular meetings with Metrorail and MWA. This continues the significant work we have done over the last 3 years in coordination with Metrorail, MWA, and the FTA project management oversight personnel to oversee Metrorail's safety certification process. We continue to track those items that we had identified as part of the construction process. These are primarily being completed through Airports Authority closeout contracts. There are currently 17 of these items open, but the steps to mitigate each of them are included in MWA's closeout contract plans or Metrorail's final preparations. In addition, as we identify any other issues, such as through our observations and document reviews related to the training and familiarization that are required by Metrorail's plans and procedures, we communicate these to Metrorail and MWA so that they can be addressed. We use our spot checks along with Metrorail's documentation of issues WMATA has identified or addressed to verify whether Metrorail's safety certification and activation processes are being carried out as designed. Metrorail recently began expanded training and familiarization activities. This includes all personnel who access the roadway anywhere in the system, receiving a general video-based familiarization and more specific training for other personnel. Metrorail expects to begin simulated service next month to provide further testing and training. Our oversight work will serve as a basis for concurrence with Metrorail's safety certification process. Our concurrence that Metrorail has met its safety certification process requirements is required before the line may open for passenger service. This occurs after Metrorail completes the activities required by its safety certification process. We continue to closely monitor the Airports Authority and Metrorail's progress. Thank you, and that completes this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Sahu. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners, Mr. Sahu? Okay, seeing none. Next item on the investigation is our safety investigations. We will hear presentations on all of the reports, then consider a single motion on all of the reports that we are prepared to adopt. If any commissioner wishes to remove a report from the group that we will consider for adoption in a single vote, please indicate that at the end of the presentation on the report. Jermaine Walker, the WMSC's track and structures expert, will present the first report. Mr. Walker.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Whiskey 0179 relates to a collision between two work units on Saturday, May 7th, 2022. The roadway maintenance machines collided in Forest Glen Station during setup activities for a weekend shutdown. Supervisor from Wayside Work Planning Department was in the area. There was a separate roadway worker in charge responsible for the work zone setup, vehicle movement, and other roadway worker protection. Prime Mover 26 coupled the two flat cars and stopped approximately halfway down the station platform. An equipment operator and flagman operator in the different consists made up of Prime Mover 40 pushing flat car 531 were returning into the station after picking up an automatic train control maintenance crew. The ATC crew members were standing on the deck of the Prime Mover. The flagman was inside a booth at the end of the flat car, which is one of two locations with an emergency brake valve. The other is outside the cab at the very front of the flat car. Metrorail did not have clear procedures for non-lead-in operations and work vehicle storage. There was no recorded communication regarding the move, including between a flagman and an equipment operator. The flagman and equipment operator did not perform safety stops that are required by the Metrorail procedure and did not communicate as required by procedure. The consist continued moving and collided with the stationary Prime Mover 26. The force of the collision and sudden stop threw the ATC personnel into each other, into parts of the vehicle and onto the ground. Two of the ATC personnel reported injuries. After the collision, the equipment operator moved the unit backward several feet before notifying anyone of the accident. This is against Metrorail policy. The changes to the scene after the collision limited the availability of specific information, such as whether emergency brakes were applied in the final moments before the collision. Metrorail's roadway maintenance machines, or RMMs, generally do not have event recorders or onboard cameras that collect this information. After the equipment operator informed the RIC of the collision, the RIC also acted contrary to Metrorail procedure and directed the equipment operator to further move the vehicle before securing it. The RIC notified the supervisor of the collision, but neither informed the Rail Operations Control Center or Metrorail Safety Department as required. Approximately an hour and a half after the collision, the supervisor contacted the Maintenance Operations Center, or MOC. This is not the proper way to report a collision, including a collision on mainline track. The MOC desk within the Rail Operations Control Center transferred the call to a ROC operations manager. After the event, the RIC and supervisor said they were not familiar with accident and incident reporting procedures. This contributed to the delay in reporting a collision to the ROC operations team and other responsible Metrorail personnel, and to Metrorail failing to report this event to the WMSC and FTA within 2 hours as required. It also led to a delay in post-event drug and alcohol testing. The testing was conducted when the ROC operations manager informed the supervisor that the testing needed to occur. Metrorail CAP C0070, addressing the training on investigation procedures and other aspects of compliance with investigation procedures, remains open. Metrorail scheduled completion date for all actionable items in this CAP is in 2023. A review of work schedule data indicates that both the equipment operator and flagman were at risk of fatigue-related impairment. Among other things, both were working their 8th consecutive night of work at the time of the collision. During this event, the work crews were using talk-around channels rather than the operations channels as part of the weekend work zone. Metrorail does not record these channels for continuous improvement and supervisory oversight. The probable cause of this event was Metrorail's inadequate procedures for non-lead-in operations and work vehicle storage. Contributing to this event was insufficient communication and Metrorail's culture that accepts non-compliance with written operational rules, procedures, and manuals. Metrorail is evaluating and updating procedures related to vehicle movement where the operator is not at the lead end. WMATA is committed to installing data and video recorders on RMMs over the next 6 years and has redistributed safety bulletin on incident reporting and post-incident testing and a lessons learned document related to safety, stop, and communication requirements. Metrorail Corrective Action Plan C0070 regarding training on and compliance with investigation procedures is open with a scheduled completion date for all actionable items in 2023. Thank you. That completes my presentation, for this presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Walker. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Mr. Walker?
I have a couple of questions, Chair Hart.
Yes, please, Commissioner Lobby.
I find it very strange that a roadway worker in charge and a supervisor would not be familiar with accident reporting. And I note that Washington Metro has put out a bulletin. Shouldn't these folks that are first line supervisors or working directly in control of these operations on Washington Metro, how can they not know what the accident reporting requirements are?
Honestly, it's hard not to know because with each class that you sit in, whether it be RWP or whether it be the supervisor training for TRST, you're taught about that. And even when you go through your manual, you're also taught what the procedures are as far as your MSRPH is currently constructed. You're also taught how to report an emergency is on the main line. I believe, and one of my colleagues could correct me if I'm wrong, you're supposed to come on that ops channel and report emergency if and when that does happen.
So the training is pretty comprehensive. There's really no excuse for not knowing how to report an accident. Is that correct?
That's correct, Chairman.
Okay, are we satisfied with this bulletin that Washington Metro wants to put out to take care of this problem?
The way it's currently constructed, I would say yes, but we are looking at ways where if it can be improved, we will definitely communicate that to them.
Okay, so we're following up on that. That seemed to be pretty egregious, not to know how to report an accident here. The second question I had is in looking at staff's report, we talk about work schedule data indicates the equipment operator and flagman were at risk of fatigue-related impairment, and this was due to the equipment operator and flagman working their 8th consecutive night of work. And yet, when I look at the Washington Metro report, it says fatigue risk for the event was determined to be moderate due to the time of day and work schedules. However, parties involved reported sufficient sleep and had enough time off preceding the event to achieve adequate rest. So we're kind of coming to different conclusions here. Are we using a different method of assessing fatigue on this, or is this our opinion, or what?
I don't like punting on the question, but I'm gonna let Mr. Miller or Mr. Mayor respond to that one.
Thanks, Mr. Walker. So a few items for consideration based on the question that you raised, Commissioner Lobby. There are several findings that we issued through the fitness for duty audit last year on this very topic, fatigue risk management, as well as hours of service, where we had described in the findings that there is, number one, Metro is not carrying out the requirements of the in effect fatigue risk management policy, which includes the hours of service requirements. And so Metro is working towards addressing that to make sure that consistently they're carrying out and adhering to all the requirements of the fatigue risk management policy, which includes hours of service. The second piece of it is we issued another finding in that same audit, which we described as Metrorail having incomplete records and documentation that they can utilize for themselves to confirm for Metrorail themselves that they are adhering with the hours of service requirements, and to ensure that fatigue risk can be thoroughly understood, evaluated, and corrected as it arises. So because of these two combination of findings, we are raising a question here about the fatigue, the possibility of fatigue having had played a contributing role in the causation of this incident. And it is not inconsistent for us to raise these questions through this cover summary that we prepare with each of our investigations, which is our role to raise questions and then follow through and require Metrorail to address those in a more holistic manner.
So would it be accurate if I said that WMSC has some concerns about fatigue management at Washington Metro and has told Washington Metro about it, and Washington Metro is basically working on the issue as we speak?
That's correct, and I wouldn't just characterize it as we have some issues and we've communicated to Metro about those issues. There are very specific requirements that we've denoted through our findings, which then resulted in Metrorail proposing corrective actions on how they would go about adhering to their, in effect, fatigue risk management policy, including their hours of service and the documentation associated with it. They proposed those corrective actions. We've reviewed them extensively, and now we've approved them. So they're in the midst of conducting the work associated with the various actions they are using in order to come back into proper compliance with their fatigue risk management policy and hours of service requirements.
So they are taking action on this right now?
Yes.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you for the question, Commissioner Labby. I have a variation on your first question, and that is, I'm wondering for Mr. Walker, are the accident reporting requirements and procedures the same for revenue passenger train cars having accidents versus maintenance, non-revenue maintenance vehicles having accidents? Are those the same requirements? I just wonder if that might be part of the reason why the by the people didn't know what the requirements were for reporting accidents.
That's correct, Chair Hart. The requirements are the same. If you have any accident on the main line, the first thing you do is make an emergency call. And so that the rock, so that the rock knows, and can identify you. And then also it's supposed to also stop everyone else with non-emergency radio transmissions to stop talking on the radio and let your emergency take priority.
Okay, thank you. Are there any questions from any of the other commissioners for Mr. Walker? Okay, seeing none. Investigations analyst, Ms. Natalie Keyrose, will present the next two reports. Ms. Keyrose, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Each of these investigations involves an improper door operation. Investigation Whiskey 0180 relates to an improper door operation on May 6, 2022, that the train operator did not report to the Rail Operations Control Center. The train operator stopped their train near the middle of the Stadium Armory Station platform on the blue, orange, and silver lines. The train operator looked out the window and opened the doors on the platform side with the trailing 2 cars of the 6-car train still in the tunnel. The doors on those cars opened off the station platform. The train operator closed the doors after about 41 seconds, but then opened the doors again with the 2 trailing cars still in the tunnel. The train operator did not report either improper door operation. The train operator closed the doors a second time, moved the train forward approximately 250 feet to the end of the platform where trains are required to stop to service the station, and opened the doors again. The train operator then continued on to the next station. During this time, when the train was at the station for a longer than usual period, the rail traffic controller radioed to ask if the train operator was okay, but the train operator did not respond for approximately 3 minutes. A rider who got off the train at Stadium Armory Station informed the station manager of improper door operation. The station manager contacted the Rail Operations Information Center in the ROCC, who relayed the information to the rail traffic controller. The rail controller directed a supervisor to board the train at Potomac Avenue, but the supervisor briefly talked to the train operator and then got off the train. This meant that when the rail controller instructed the supervisor to take over operation of the train, the supervisor could not. The rail controller then asked the train operator if they had opened the doors off the platform at Stadium Armory. The train operator affirmed they had. The rail controller instructed a different rail supervisor to board the train and take over operation. This occurred at Roslyn Station approximately 25 minutes after the initial event. Metrorail did not conduct a ground walk-around or other inspection of the tunnel area near Stadium Armory Station as specified in its safety procedures. This train operator had also moved a train without speed commands at Federal Center Southwest Station on April 20th, about 2 weeks before this event. This was identified during a Metrorail QA/QC audit. After this improper door operation event on May 6th, Metrorail disqualified this train operator from rail operations through its disciplinary process. The probable cause of this event was Metrorail's ineffective supervisory oversight, insufficient recertification practices, and culture of noncompliance with written operational rules, procedures, and manuals. Metrorail is implementing corrective action plans associated with the Wmsc's rail operations audit issued in April 2022. Metrorail has committed to completing the CAP for finding 1 of the audit in October 2024. This CAP addresses consistent supervisory oversight, effective training, safety promotion, just culture, and other elements of the safety management system Metrorail has committed to in its Public Transportation Agency Safety Plan. Investigation Whiskey 0181 relates to an improper door operation at Judiciary Square Station on May 17th, 2022. A train operator opened the doors on the wrong side. The train operator closed the doors, opened the doors on the correct side, and reported the improper door operation to the Rail Operations Control Center as required. The train operator had not looked out the cab window to verify the platform side prior to opening the doors. In all, the doors were open on the incorrect side for approximately 10 seconds from when they started opening to when they fully closed. Metrorail responded appropriately, including by having the train operator perform a ground walk-around. The train operator said during the investigation that they were distracted thinking about recent safety events. Metrorail conducted a series of communications with employees regarding improper door operation events and increased interactions regarding recent safety concerns. Thank you. That completes this presentation.
Thank you, Ms. Keyrose. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners regarding either of these two reports by Ms. Keyrose?
Chair Hart, I have a comment.
Yes, please, Commissioner Lobby.
Yeah, I think these two accidents are interesting. The first one is where an operator did open the doors on the wrong side and did not report it, and caused several problems. And in the second case, where things happened, a mistake was made, but things happened in the right order, and the operator itself immediately reported the issue, and the issue was corrected, and things went well. And I think it really is a good example of why it's important to do the right thing. I assume that the second operator was not disciplined for confessing that he opened the doors on the wrong side. Is that correct?
But definitely not disqualified, sir. But I'm sure through the disciplinary process, there's a point system that Archer Rail Operations uses. So good possibility that they receive some type of points for the violation.
Okay, but he wasn't taken out of service for 2 years like the previous operator. So I think there's a good lesson there.
Absolutely.
Thank you, Commissioner Lobby. I'm just curious, what conceivable reason is there for someone to stop in the middle of the station? When you say the middle, does that mean that even with a short train, it wouldn't be accommodated within the station, with a 6-car train instead of an 8-car train wouldn't have been accommodated within the station? I'm just curious about why would someone stop somewhere other than the right place?
That's correct. It was a 6-car train, and it sounds like they might have stopped halfway. So they still had 2 cars in the tunnel. And we're with you on that. And we couldn't understand how anyone would stop there. There would never be a reason to stop there unless there was some emergency right in front of the train. And the train operator didn't have any explanation. They, during the investigation, said that they believed they stopped at the 8-car marker.
So this would not be a situation where an 8-car train stopped at the 6-car mark?
No, this event was actually a 6-car train that stopped in the middle of the platform. Right.
Okay. Thank you. Thank you. Are there any other questions from any of the commissioners for Ms. Keyrose? All right. Thank you. Moving on, Investigation Program Manager, Mr. Adam Quigley, will present the final 2 reports. Mr. Quigley, the floor is yours.
Thank you, Chair Hart. Investigation Whiskey 0182 relates to an improper roadway worker protection on the Red Line, May 3rd, 2022. The Red Line train came upon a work crew without warning at approximately 09:46 in the morning. The track inspection crew had entered the roadway without permission or protection at Metro Center Station as they attempted to continue an inspection toward Farragut North Station. The crew had gotten permission to conduct prior segments of their inspection between Union Station and Metro Center as part of their planned inspection walk to Woodley Park Station. At Metro Center, the 2 inspectors, one of them designated as the roadway worker in charge, entered the roadway without contacting the Rail Operations Control Center or their advanced mobile flagger. Contact with both is required under Metrorail rules to conduct such an inspection safely. The train operator did not immediately report the near miss to the ROC. The train operator attempted to contact the RIC over the radio to tell the RIC to have their AMF begin flagging to warn trains that the inspectors were on the roadway. A rail traffic controller overheard this communication and asked the train operator approximately a minute later if that train operator had made a request. The train operator then told the rail traffic controller that the AMF did not know the inspectors were on the roadway. The specific location of the near miss was not stated in these communications. The rail traffic controller then instructed the RIC to contact the AMF. The RIC wrongly stated that the inspectors were between Gallery Place and Metro Center stations at the time. This communication did not include reference to their locations as determined by a chain marker, the sign every 100 feet on the tunnel wall that specifies the line, track, and location. A couple minutes later, the RIC correctly stated that they were between Metro Center and Farragut North stations. The rail traffic controller did not require the inspection crew to stand clear and await a train pickup. The investigation demonstrated that the AMF had been at Farragut North Station platform, but had not been informed by the RIC that they should begin warning trains that the inspection crew was on the roadway. The probable cause of this event was a lack of focus on supervisory oversight regarding the safety critical task of ensuring proper roadway worker protection. Contributing to this event was the lack of involvement of all members of the work crew in ensuring proper RWP procedure. As part of the corrective actions related to this and other events, Metrorail Safety Department is reviewing options to ensure employees remain aware of their surroundings while conducting roadway tasks, including a review of policies, procedures, and signage. Tracking Structures conducted a safety talk focused on proper radio communications during roadway operations. Metrorail continues to work on additional changes to its roadway worker protection program. This completes this presentation. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Quigley. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Mr. Quigley?
I have a couple of questions, Chair Hart.
Yes, Commissioner Lobby.
First of all, Mr. Quigley, the action of the operator, did the operator, once he encountered people in the tunnel, did he take the right actions?
No, sir. No, sir. Should have contacted the ROC immediately.
Okay, and he didn't. Who did he contact?
He made attempt to contact the RIC and instruct the RIC or remind the RIC to have their flagmen, start their flagging duties, to talk to the operators.
Okay. Secondly, when we say that Metro is reviewing their procedures, what does that really mean? Are they just talking to the people involved in the accident, or do they talk to everybody that has similar duties, or what? What does that mean when they're reviewing their policies and procedures with the staff?
They're looking at the CFR, FRA regulation procedures to use as a foundation to build upon their procedures. I think it's 214, I believe, CFR 214, RWP, roadway worker protection, industry best practices. They're just trying to use that as a foundation moving forward to keep their employees safe out on the roadway.
But that was part of the question. But do they also review the issue with the people involved in the accident, or people that serve the function of an advanced mobile flagger or others?
Yes, absolutely. And I would say right now, the whole AMF procedure is kind of in the fishbowl, really getting looked at. I mean, they are constantly out there doing audits, compliance checks, trying to understand where the miscommunication is in this process, and to keep these people safe.
But if I'm an AMF on Metro, did somebody come and tell me in some class or something? Did somebody tell me about what happened here and remind me of my duties or anything like that, or is it all written bulletins or what?
Safety talks, like we said, they had like a safety sand down on this event. Lessons learned documents that people are signed for. I think we've had discussions about that in the past, but it's a little bit, I would say, a mixture of both. A verbal reminder in maybe a safety briefing before everybody goes out when they sign up for duty, along with some documents. And
so lots of different tools used to get the word out, right?
There you go. Thank you, sir. Tools. That's what I was looking for.
Okay, thank you.
Thank you, Commissioner Lowry. Any questions from any of the other commissioners for Mr. Quigley regarding this report? Okay, hearing none. Mr. Quigley, would you please present the next report?
Absolutely. Final report, Whiskey 0183 relates to an evacuation for life safety reasons on the Blue Line. A Metrorail rider reported hearing a threat to blow up the Blue Line train they were riding on near Crystal City Station. The rider reported this to Metro Transit Police Department, which identified the involved train while the train was approaching Braddock Road Station. MTPD personnel in the field stated they would respond to Franconia Springfield Station at the end of the Blue Line. MTPD later checked the train at Franconia for possible explosives after all riders had cleared the train and no explosives were found. At 3:03, the MTPD watch commander directed the whole station be evacuated based on the MTPD safety protocol. MTPD later stated it did not follow that instruction, as they stated that they had already checked the station for explosives. Radio recordings demonstrated rail supervisor at Franconia Springfield informed the Rail Operations Control Center at 3:08 p.m. that MTPD personnel at the station had cleared the station and that it was safe for train movement. Metrorail did not implement an incident command structure as required by its policies. Metrorail is required to address this and other issues through its corrective action plans to address findings from the Wmsc's emergency management and fire life safety program audits issued earlier this year. Evacuations for life safety reasons, including bomb threats, are classified as accidents by the Federal Transit Administration and must be reported to both the FTA and Wmsc, and that requires safety investigation. Thank you. This completes the final presentation.
Thank you, Mr. Quigley. I have a question about the urgency of this matter. It seems to me, how long was it after the report was given that they actually investigated the train for explosives?
It was about 5 stations, sir. By the time they were able to identify the train, car number, things like that from the customer, I think got on at Roslyn or Foggy Bottom and decided to get off, after hearing these threats at Crystal City, and immediately notified transit. And then once transit did their due diligence to locate the train in what direction and what color, blue or yellow, they dispatched personnel.
So was the delay because they weren't able to identify the train immediately, or just because they wanted the train to go to a terminus before it was investigated?
There's some coordination between transit and the ROC, so I would probably say the delay would just to verify the train, make sure they had the accurate train, sir.
Okay, thank you. Any questions from any of the other commissioners for Mr. Quigley? Okay, thanks to all of you for your reports. I'm going to accept a motion to adopt the investigation reports that have been presented, assuming that all the commissioners are fine with doing this collectively with all of them in the same vote. So is there a motion to adopt the investigation reports? Whiskey 0179, 180, 181, 182, and 183.
So moved.
Okay, so move Commissioner Rush. Is there a second? Thank you, Commissioner Rush.
Second.
Second, I didn't see who did that.
It was Commissioner Farrar-Dyke.
Commissioner Farrar-Dyke, thank you.
Race between the Marylanders there.
I see. Okay. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say yay.
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 Any opposed, please raise your hand and say nay.
Chair Hart, the vote is 4-0 on this one. The motion carries.
Okay.
Or I'm sorry, Commissioner Al-Khatib, or not Commissioner Al-Khatib, Commissioner Lobby, did you vote on this one? Since I don't see Commissioner Hall, you could.
I'm an alternate, so no, I don't vote on these.
Well, you can be promoted to a regular commissioner because Hall is not available at the moment.
All right, I vote to adopt them.
Okay. 5-0, and I will make a note of that in the minutes.
Thank you, Mr. Smith, for your attention to that detail. I appreciate that. So we will now move on to resolutions and other actions. Today, we're taking up a consideration of our updated disadvantaged business enterprise, or DBE goals. I'm proud that we exceeded our goals under our current plan, and I look forward to Dr. Meyer and his team continuing to meet the requirements of our new plan moving forward. Finance and Operations Committee reviewed this item. So Secretary Treasurer Farrar-Dyke, do you have anything that you would like to add?
Thank you, Chair Hart. The DBE program is an important part of our work, including as it relates to federal grants and state funding and the effective execution of our safety oversight program. This is an important way to ensure that we provide ample opportunity to qualified businesses to conduct work when we have the need to hire contractors. In conjunction with other procurement procedures, the WMSC's DBE program helps level the playing field by ensuring opportunity to compete for those contracts. The program is required under federal regulation. The Finance and Operations Committee considered this item last week and recommends adoption of the updated DBE program. Mr. Anji, WMSC's CFO, did you have any additional remarks?
Thank you, Secretary Treasurer Fardike. As you said, this is an important program. Through our initial DBE reporting period of the year 2020 through 2022, the WMSC achieved a DBE percentage of 11.6%. This is well above our goal of 4.3%. This percentage was achieved primarily through the WMSC's outsourcing of IT services over the 3-year period. The WMSC's proposed goal for the second 3-year period, years 2023 through 2025, is 7.7%. We have gained internal efficiencies that allow us to move past outsourcing support activities, such as accounting and IT, at the same rate as we did during the inception of the organization. We have other opportunities to meet or exceed our goal through existing contracts and future procurements over the 3-year period. If viewers would like to share comments on the WMSC's DB activities or the proposed goal of 7.7, you're welcome to send them to correspondence@wmsc.gov. That email address again is correspondence@wmsc.gov. Finally, I ask the commissioners to adopt the resolution R 2022-03, approving the updated DBE plan and new goal. Thank you.
Thank you, Secretary Treasurer Fardike and Mr. Angie. Are there any questions from any of the commissioners for Secretary Treasurer Fardike or Mr. Angie? All right, hearing none, is there a motion to approve our updated DBE goal of 7.7%?
So moved.
So moved, Commissioner Rush. Is there a second to that motion? I will second the motion. All those in favor, please raise your hand and say yay. Yay.
Nay.
Nay.
All opposed, please raise your hand and say nay.
Chair Hart, the vote is 5-0 and the motion carries.
Thank you, Mr. Smith. That completes our business for today. I would like to thank Dr. Meyer and his staff for preparing for and conducting this meeting. Thanks to the commissioners for their thoughtful and extensive and thorough engagement in the process. And thanks to the public who attended this meeting remotely. As a reminder, members of the public can always report any concerns through our website, wmsc.gov, through our social media channels like Twitter, Instagram, and Facebook, or by email. And as I mentioned earlier, I would like to thank those employees and members of the public for submitting information to us, including pictures that enabled us to pursue the safety issues of WMATA. We expect to hold our next public meeting on October 25th, 2022. We look forward to seeing everyone then. Is there any further business? Hearing none, this meeting is adjourned.